welcome to episode 8 of the Cynical Challenge. My name is Greyson and Jeff. So glad you could join us here. Now, if you're watching this instead of just listening to it, you see the setup is a little bit different. We do have Jeff Salisbury joining us from Saskatoon. Sally, how you doing this evening?
I smell a heck of a lot like Fuddruckers because we had that for supper. And I don't know if anybody in the country knows this, but Saskatoon is the only Canadian city with a Fuddruckers in it. So it's a treat.
It's legendary in Saskatoon.
Legendary.
It's so good.
It is.
And we also have our very first guest of the podcast. We have Sandra Prusina joining us from Calgary. You may know Sandra from her work, bylines in sportsnet.ca and canpl.ca. She works for iNews 660 in Calgary on the radio and a little bit for Sportsnet 960 as well. Big advocate for women's sports and women's soccer in particular. Sandra, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Doing really well and happy to chat with you guys a little bit. I'm excited you said your first guest?
Yes.
Yeah.
What? Wow, the bar's going to be pretty low for everybody else now.
It might be really high.
I don't know.
Well, you might end up replacing Jeff's if you play your cards right. So
that's a good point. He had a workshop tonight, so he is doing soccer related stuff, just not on the podcast here. Sandra, first of all, I just want to say International Women's Day was this past Monday, and you did a lot of really cool interviews with Sportsnet 960. One in particular, Stephanie Labbé, was the one that stood out to me, Canadian women's national team goalkeeper. Just kind of talked about her career, her progression. And then one thing that really stuck out was some of her comments regarding women's sport and the way it's supported here in the country of Canada, and just, well, I guess the lack maybe thereof, particularly from investors. Maybe just tell people a little bit about that conversation and some of the comments that Steph made.
Yeah, and it really stood true to me, the fact that, we're celebrating International Women's Day, and the fact that that's really the only day that we have a platform to have wall-to-wall women's sports coverage. And Steph touched on the fact that, yes, Canada is very seemingly a liberal country, and that's something that we're really proud about here. But when it comes to women's sports, sometimes people can't be bothered unless it's a major event, say it's a World Cup, an Olympics. And I think that really rings true to both women's soccer and women's hockey. She touched on the fact that there is no, other than Toronto 6 of the National Women's Hockey League, there are no professional teams of any sorts in this country. So a country like Canada not to have a professional sports team for women is very, very shocking. And she finds it sad. And I know we were talking about the fact that we could pack Commonwealth Stadium back in 2002, 2015 with the respective World Cups that were here. So there's clearly interest here for women's sport. And she said, yeah, maybe the first couple of years investors won't see any money being made, but you have to take that step. And nobody is willing to take that step. We're getting closer. I think with the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, we're getting there, but they will need backing, say, of the NHL to ease everybody into that kind of a product. I know a lot of people talk about the NWSL coming to Canada and coming north of the border. I don't know how soon that's coming, and I hope I'm not spoiling what we're going to talk about later, but I'm really surprised here in Canada that there was no huge interest in the fact that United Women's Soccer League and the National Independent Soccer Association earlier this year, they announced that they would be coming together and creating a Division II women's soccer league, professional league. And that's something that's absolutely missing. That's something that Steph chatted about with me. And the fact that really it slid through the cracks, I thought it was such a huge deal because it's going to be a North American pro league that's going to fit right under the NWSL. So essentially those players coming out of college who don't want to go to Europe, they will have a place to play here professionally, likely as soon as next year if everything goes according to plan. So it looks like it's on the horizon, but again, it's not here as of yet, but that's something to look forward to because we might be putting too many hands and too many too many of our aspirations to bring the NWSL to Canada. I don't think it's a pipe dream, but I think it's a longer vision down the road. And the fact that maybe a Division II team will be possible in North America as soon as next year, that's at least something to look forward to. And it's pretty exciting.
For sure. Yeah, we will get into plenty of D2 talk later. I brought up Steph Labbe. Obviously, the She Believes Cup was just a couple of weeks ago, and Steph was kind of thrown into that first match against the Americans and played the rest of the way. Sandra, just your thoughts. I know we talked about it a couple of episodes ago, Jeff, but I want to get Sandra's thoughts on what she made of the tournament. Obviously, no Christine Sinclair, Ashley Lawrence, Jordan Heidema, Kadisha Buchanan, some big names missing, and then others through injury, and then others had to leave early too. Just what were your thoughts on how Canada did there?
So I would probably say as expected, just given the layoff for Canada, the team essentially hadn't been together in almost a year. Some players did get playing time in the NWSL Challenge Cup. And then, of course, like you mentioned, some are across the pond. We do have FA that's been going on. But I think just the results are expected. And I'm really glad that they played the Americans first, because that sets an exceptionally high bar. However, I found as the tournament went down, the glaring issues were still there. So the issue that Canada is still struggling in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net. But I don't think it's a bad thing that we saw that, because of course this is Bev Priestman's first tournament, her first camp as head coach and taking those reins. So now she knows exactly what she has to work with. You touched on it. The team had to put some players in some different situations. Let's say if Christine Sinclair isn't there, maybe we don't get to see someone like Sarah Stratigakis. If Kadisha Buchanan came, maybe we don't get a slight glimpse of Vanessa Gilles, and she stood out exceptionally well in that first game against the Americans. And something that Coach Priestman talked about going into the tournament was the fact she emphasized bravery, and she wants to see everybody on the team take that extra chance. So I think we got a glimpse of it. We got a glimpse of what this team can be. And it's exciting because I think it's a different blueprint than we saw from the previous two coaches. But we also saw what glaring issues are still there, and that is putting the ball in the back of the net. So getting the ball up the pitch isn't the issue, it's finishing in that final third. And from here on in, luckily there are a couple of friendlies coming up, so we'll see how they adapt to that, and hopefully Christine will be back. But it also showed that there is a future without Christine, but what that is still a little bit murky.
So I think, talking so much about Christine is a major point for this team moving forward, in the sense that it still feels like Christine is our only option to actually be able to score. I mean, for you, who do you see as somebody that might be able to potentially take over that role from her? Because it didn't happen during this tournament.
Yes, and that I agree with you there. And I was actually really surprised that Janine Becky's form from England didn't transfer into this international tournament. That really surprised me. And I'm wondering if she's still in the back of her mind, if she's still thinking to the 2019 World Cup. And it's almost like she's a little tentative, a little bit scared to make a mistake, because she had obviously taken the team on her shoulders with that penalty kick. So I hope that she can just put that's in the rear view. Don't worry about that, because she has the opportunity to be one of the highest goal scorers in the history of this team. I honestly think that she does. Nichelle Prince, she shows really good glimpses and uses her pace exceptionally well. But again, it needs to translate into the back of the net. She has to be more selfish. And that's one of the issues with this team. If you have an opportunity and a good shot on goal, take it. And I think that goes back to what Coach Priestman was talking about with that bravery. Don't be afraid to take that shot. One player I hope, and I'd longed to see her for many years, because I followed her college career very closely, and that's Evelyn Vienne. And it took a very long time for her to get into the program, because the previous coaching staff, for whatever reason, and I don't know what it is, they just felt that her college game wouldn't translate into the international stage. And yet we're seeing what she's doing professionally in France. She's one of the highest goal scorers there. So take a chance with some of these players, and hopefully we can see a little bit more from Evelyn in the near future.
Well, without that touch from her in that Argentina game, Strategakis doesn't score that goal. So
that's right.
Yep.
I guess the big things, you mentioned the friendlies coming up. They added Wales to the calendar, and they'll play England as well. England will be a very, very good test. And then it's the Olympic Games. Is it fair to put expectations on this team? Obviously, they have bronze medals in the last 2 Olympic Games, but this is a new coach. I don't know if we're quite seeing a shifting of the guard, but it sure seems like we're getting there. Is it fair to put any expectations on the team? Because obviously they're going to be looked at as favorites coming off those 2 bronze medals previously.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think expectations are there, just given the team's previous history at the Olympics. I just think going in, even a casual follower of soccer in this country, someone that maybe only follows every 4 years, say at the Olympics, they're going to expect this team to end up at the podium at some place. The thing with an Olympic tournament, I find that it's not as deep as a World Cup. Obviously, you don't have as many players, and the tournament itself isn't as grueling. And I think if you find lightning in a bottle, you can definitely finish on the podium. And Calgary, my apologies, Canada showed it can do it in the previous 2 Olympics. I mean, you think back to that game, the bronze medal game in Brazil, and in a stadium like that with everybody cheering against you, and the team did exceptionally well, and the performance from somebody like Melissa Tancredi, who took the team on her back versus Germany, and so many great performances. So I just think at the Olympics, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we see the team on the podium again.
You know, it's interesting how, and you mentioned how the World Cup is a more grueling competition. It seems interesting, and I've always found it interesting how this team seems to be able to step up for a tournament like the Olympics, but we haven't really been able to step up yet for a World Cup. What are your thoughts on that kind of dichotomy between, you know, performances of these 2 different competitions?
That's another really neat point. And I was actually working on a piece for radio talking to Tommy Wilden Sr. He's working in England now, and he's working with a boarding school there with a program that's working with Chelsea's women's team. And they're trying to get a couple of people to go there, 16 to 18-year-old girls. And he was mentioning to me, he actually thought Canada's best chance was in 2015, just given the depth of the team that year and the fact that we were hosting the tournament. And not necessarily ironically, but it was England that took that step forward and finished in 3rd place and really set itself on that stage as more of a powerhouse in terms of women's football. So it's interesting, the fact that Canada couldn't use the momentum from hosting the Women's World Cup that year. 2011 was that was a complete gong show, and the drama that was surrounding Carolina Marazzi. I think back to what was essentially a new starting point for the team. And then 2019, sorry to be jumping around all over the place, but that to me was, and I say this with all respect to Kenneth Hyler-Moeller, but those were some very peculiar coaching decisions in that particular tournament. I don't know why you would ever play 3 back against Sweden. Just so many questions. And it was just a poor and disappointing performance. I understand why Janine Becky wanted to take that penalty kick. I do. But that should have been Christine's shot. I still echo that to this very day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough for me to just pinpoint one certain thing. It's just whatever it is about the World Cup, it just doesn't work out for this team. And I think 2015, if I look back, I mean, we could look into the early 2000s when Canada had I'm thinking of Canada's 4th place finish, and that was the best finish. But of course, that was a smaller field, fewer people or fewer teams were there at that time. So for me, 2015 sticks out the most as the time where Canada could have done the most damage. Christine in her prime, but it just wasn't meant to be.
That's right. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, it's interesting. thing you mentioned is the changes in managers that the women's national teams had here in the last really decade. It's been a roller coaster. I mean, they went from having the Wicked Witch of the West of Carolina Marache in the early 2010s to then moving on to John Herdman and his practically revolutionary style that he brought in. And then the devastation that was caused when he essentially jumped ship from the women's program to lead the men's side. And you know, kind of moving to essentially like the backup plan, which was Kenneth Heine-Moley. And now they're on to Bev Priestman. So what are your thoughts on Bev and the job she has in front of her? I know we've kind of talked about, you know, if this Olympics is really going to be one where we should expect a medal or not, but what do you think Bev has on her plate, and what do you think what are going to be the goalposts for her?
What I really like talking to Bev is she knows now this is her team. With Kenneth Heine-Moller, it was, okay, I have John's old team. Essentially, that's what it felt like to me, where he was just taking scrap pieces from what John Herdman had created and just trying to just drag a few more years out of that particular roster. And the feeling that I get from Bev is these are her roster selections. I guarantee you, if Kenneth was still in charge, I don't think Evelyn Vienne gets a call to this national team. For whatever reason, they were just not interested in bringing her to the fold. And she's already leaving her imprint. And I get the feeling from the players, they really want to play for her. And that's so crucial when you have a leader at the top. And I think they did that for John. You know, that I could just tell the impact that he had on their lives, particularly Christine. I don't think we'll ever forget her running into his arms when she scored that PK in Edmonton versus China. And so when you have a coach who will do anything for you, your players will play for you. And I think we're getting that feeling from Bev, because she's giving players a chance. And players, again, I hate to pick on him, but there's no way that Vanessa Gilles sees any minutes with Kenneth Heine-Moller in charge. And that's just the honest truth. He had his certain players that he wanted to play all the time. Bev doesn't see that way. She doesn't have tunnel vision. She has peripheral vision, and she knows what everybody's doing. And I really appreciate that with her. She has honesty. She calls a spade when she needs to. And I really like what she's bringing to this team.
Yeah, I was going to say, sure. Sally and I might not have seen Christine run into John's arms in Edmonton, because we were in the V section, and it was a gong show when she finally heard that penalty. What a moment. Oh, that was so cool. Just to wrap up that Olympic chatter, Japan is there, obviously, as the host. Brazil is the lone South America team. We saw what they could do. The Americans, New Zealand, only 3 European teams, Britain, which will mostly be English players, then the Netherlands, who really showed at the last World Cup that they're coming up. Sweden, not a pushover, and the Aussies are never an easy out either. So lots of good competition there for Canada. Sally, you had one more point you wanted to make here?
Yeah, I've already forgotten it, so we better keep going.
Sandra, I just wanted to ask, let's look big picture.
Sure.
By next World Cup, Christine Sinclair, I think she's going to be 40 or awfully close if she's not. What does Bev Priestman has to do, I guess, to move from this generation to the next? And what do you see from this team by the next World Cup? What are they going to look like, and maybe even further than that down the road?
That's such a good question. I thought we saw a little bit of a preview of it here, especially seeing Quinn in the midfield, and that really interested me with them, and just to see what they could do, because just looking back to their college days and a little bit in the professional days, you can see what they have to offer. It just no longer just a center back, and I really like that. And I see so much happening in the midfield. I think Jessie Fleming will play a bigger role under Bev Priestman. It is such a shame she's only getting garbage minutes with Chelsea. I think she did play a little bit with Champions League here this week, but she needs to be getting some consistent minutes somewhere. And I think if she does, she will be the crux for Bev Priestman's team, along with Janine Becky. I look at to those two. With Janine, obviously you can see that she's crucial in terms of set pieces, and she drives the play forward. I think she'll probably be the captain of this team going forward when, let's say, Sophie Schmidt and Desi Scott probably, I think they're in that group of players you're thinking of, Grayson, that'll probably be moving on. I don't think we're going to see too much more of Diana Matheson. She's had some pretty significant injuries over the past couple of years here. So yeah, we're seeing that end of that Herdman 2012 era, very special group of players, but we'll see. I think Nichelle Prince, she's going to take on a bigger role. I'm curious about Deanne Rose as we go into her first professional year, how she's going to react to professional soccer. So if she does well in the NWSL, I think that we'll see her play a bigger role. And one of my wild cards, she's always one of my wild cards, is Adriana Leon. And I'm always curious with what she has to offer, because she's gone through this really interesting projection in her career where she was with the U20s and she was the star. And then under John Herdman, he eased her in, but then he didn't call her for a few camps. And I think he wanted her to learn a little bit more maturity. And she went, playing very well in England. So I think she has the opportunity to take a more significant role on this team. And Kaylin Sheridan, hopefully her injury isn't serious, but she is going to be absolutely the starting goalkeeper for this team. She is, if she's anything like we saw last summer with Sky Blue, man, the sky is the limit, no pun, sorry. The sky is the limit for that young lady, because she is fantastic.
Yeah, I was really upset that she didn't get a chance to show, and I really like that Bev gave her the start against the Americans. It's a shame that she had that injury. I wanted to see Riley Foster too in that tournament. I'm a little surprised that Bev went with Steph the entire time, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right?
I expected Foster to actually start that Argentina game.
I did too. Yeah,
that she was at least going to get one game, and if it was going to be one, it'd be that Argentina game. But man, Sandra, everything there's so many questions now in my head after what you just said. try and get all this out here. But mentioning Desi and Sophie, I know we talked about the tournament a few episodes ago, and I think we all identified for sure Sophie. And in my mind, I think Desi Scott, those are two players who I think the game has surpassed their abilities in my mind. But I mean, so Quinn coming in the midfield and just performing lights out. Her and Vanessa Gilles were players of the match in that match against the US, in my opinion. So, but the problem is besides Quinn, who else do we have? Because we basically have to fill two spots now in that midfield. Quinn takes one. Who's that second player that's going to come in and take on that sort of second defensive midfielder role? Because honestly, both Sophie and Desi have played more on that defensive side of the ball. Sophie, maybe more of a traditional center midfielder, but you get what I mean, right? So
I do.
Who's that second player that's going to come in and play that role?
So bear with me on this suggestion, but depending on what happens, I think there's an opportunity here. And I don't always think people should be playing with three back, but depending on who the opposition may be, the fact that we now know that Vanessa Gilles can command a back line and played exceptionally well against the Americans, a team she had never faced before with all that powerhouse. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. We could often see three at the back with Shalina Zadorsky, Kadisha Buchanan, Vanessa Gilles, which allows you, and if need be, if you do play with four, you have Alicia Chapman. I don't know how much longer she'll play, but she's still, I mean, an ox. And I mean that with all respect, because she's a beast.
Yeah, I get it.
And you take Ashley Lawrence, because she is a Jill of all trades. You can put Ashley wherever on the field. And I really think that her best play is in the midfield. So if we could harness that, take her away from being a fullback and put her into the midfield, I think that opens things up a little bit. And that would probably be my best suggestion. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, that makes me curious then. So I'll put together at least two. So two players I think that are locks for our midfield now are Quinn and Jessie Fleming. So you would add Ashley Lawrence in as well. Would you have three in the mid, or would you be playing? So you'd probably be playing what, a 3-5-2? Is that type of formation you're thinking?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. And I mean, we could, just because I think there is enough firepower, you could see Janine Becky stepping back a little bit, but I don't know if I'd like to see her in a midfield role, but maybe as an offensive midfielder, just if we were, let's say, do a diamond, I could see her at the top of that diamond, and then on her side, you've got a Nichelle Prince, and then you've maybe got a Deanne Rose or a Evelyn Vienne. Those are some options too. Julia Grosso, I think she can play very well defensively. I think she's another option. And that's kind of the way that it plays out in my head. Of course, I'm not a coach. I don't have any coaching certifications, but if I were to do a chart, that's kind of how it would look like for me.
Interesting. Okay. Now I have to remember one of the other things I was going to mention. I can't now, so we're going to have to keep moving on.
Sally, you're going to have to start writing stuff down, buddy.
I know, right? It was a long day at work.
No, that's fair. I think one of the things you brought up, Sandra, that kind of will gently guide us into our next topic of discussion was minutes. Jessie Fleming obviously was so good in the younger ranks. She was going to be a star for Canada, and it seemed like, she's been getting minutes for the national team since she was 17 years old, and then just kind of like nowhere to develop. And she, goes over and plays for Chelsea, and that looks really good. You play for Chelsea, but if you're not getting consistent minutes on the pitch, well, that's a problem. And this seems to be the gap now for us. And Sally and I, and we've talked about it with JP before, but Christine and that group seem to glaze over a lot of problems. The development has been kind of lost. And as we talked about off the top, Steph Labbe lamenting, the lack of a professional development here in this country, and just how desperately is it needed. And now that we're starting to see the cracks in this team, are we going, well, now we're already way behind everyone? Is that kind of what you're thinking there, Sandra?
I absolutely think so. Yeah. I think the statistic was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Canada is the only team in the top 10 of the FIFA rankings that does not have a professional league.
It sounds right. Yeah.
That's shocking to me. That's so shocking to me. And it's sad because I wonder how many players this team has missed out on. The fact that there's nowhere to play. Because remember, not everybody develops at the same time. You have players that it does take them, for every Jessie Fleming, there's a Vanessa Gilles out there. Right. I'm curious how many Vanessa Gilles we have in this country that we didn't know about. And if there were a Division II, and there will be, obviously, with the formation of what the UWS and the NICA are doing for next year, there will be that opportunity. But I like to lament on the fact, and like Steph was lamenting on the fact, that there's so many lost years here because players graduate from college, and if they don't go play, listen, we all know that the NWSL is going to focus on American players. They don't care about Canadians, and that's their prerogative because that's their league. I don't blame them at all. Of course they want to develop American players and give them playing time. Why would they care what the Canadians do unless your name is Christine Sinclair?
Right.
So you need a place to play, and that's where this comes in. And we need a league in Canada. And the NWSL is not the be-all, end-all of all soccer. If you had the opportunity as a player to play 90 minutes a night or 75 minutes a night and play in a Division II team, or if you play in the NWSL and you play garbage minutes every third game, what are you going to pick? What do you want for your development? What do you want for the development of this team? I'm confident Bev Priestman would pick the first option for her players.
Literally exactly what Jeff Paul said last week, except for on the men's side with D2. He said, the young Canadian Premier League players, what are they doing? He used the example of the FC Edmonton kids that were able to play in the Alberta Major Soccer League with the U20 team. But one of the things that you've seen, obviously, in Calgary is the Foothills program, the UWS program that they have with Troy Flannery, who's now up in St. Albert and going to start a UWS team up there, which is just another exciting opportunity, but it's not quite enough. What have you seen with what Foothills has done, and how do you think that type of model can be expanded?
Yeah, I really like what Foothills has provided this country, not only this province, but this country, with some incredible soccer leadership from youth all the way to men's and to women's. And getting to know Troy over the past couple of years, I have to say he is one of the brightest soccer minds that I've ever dealt with. And I'm so glad that he's sharing his talents. Selfishly, I'm sad it's not here in Calgary with Foothills, but I'm glad he's staying in the province because he obviously sees something special in Northern Alberta and the players that are coming out of Northern Alberta. So I'm very excited. And Foothills, it was so incredible to me when I found out that there was going to be a UWS team coming to Calgary. I couldn't imagine that in the first year, they would essentially be one spot away from a playoffs. And every season that they were in the league, they went a step higher. Then they made the playoffs next year. And then the following year, they made the final. Calgary hosted it. And unfortunately, they fell short. But they've given an opportunity for some players. And you're right, it's a pro-am setup, so they only play for however many weeks in a year, but it gives them the taste of what it's like to be professional, those long bus rides, pandemic aside. So you're traveling, I know, to California, and they got to go to all these cool places. And when they went to the Final Four, they went somewhere else. So you're getting a glimpse of that professional lifestyle and how to treat your body and how you need to wind down and physio. So it's giving these players who are in college another foundation for their careers. So they go and they play college, and then they still have these 6 or 7 weeks that they can play at a very high level. So for Foothills to introduce that to Canada, I think was huge. I'm actually really surprised more cities and more clubs in the country didn't get on board. I think, was there one in Victoria? Was there a team in Victoria? There were talks. Maybe the pandemic, it's changed everything. But the fact that Foothills was essentially the founding father, the founding mother, whatever you want to call it, of the UWS, it's huge. And I give full kudos to Troy and what he's done. And I talk a lot with Katie, who's one of the assistant coaches now with Foothills. And I have so much respect for her and what she's doing as one of the top women's coaches in this country. And we always talk about, okay, what do these girls need? And she always touches on it. She says they need a pro. They need a pro league to play in. And that's where we are right now. So again, just going back to your original question, I'm not saying this as a homer because I'm from Calgary, but Foothills has set an exceptionally high bar, and all the best of luck to Troy. Maybe not so much success about, when they play Foothills this year, but I do wish him the best. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I had a chance to meet him over the holidays as well, doing a piece on that Impact team. I said Impact and Foothills, with the pandemic, they might have just play each other a dozen times over the summer and call it good.
That's right. You might start seeing the St. Albert casuals showing up.
Hey, listen, I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing. It would be a derby every single weekend. Yeah. Let's do it. That'd be fun.
Can't complain.
A 2v2 battle. Yeah. Well, I think some of the fans wanted to dub it the El Clasico, which I thought was great. So yeah, let's do it.
So in speaking about this Division 2, in your mind, how does this need to take shape? In the sense of like how nationwide does it need to be? Where's the level of investment need to be? In your ideal world, how does this league need to take shape? What does it need to look like?
Yeah, so my understanding is that it will follow the UWS model that's been there right now. So essentially it has its regions, which is great because it makes it easy for travel. So let's say in Canada, you do Southern Alberta, Northern Alberta. I would assume it would be Calgary, Edmonton. You could have something a little bit more east in the prairies in terms of Regina, Saskatoon. And then I'm wondering if you could also do something kind of in the Okanagan type area, and then maybe even stretch as far as Vancouver. So at least if you're traveling by bus, it's not ridiculous in that kind of a sense. So, and then you have the regions, and then eventually you meet in a Final Four or whatever you decide in terms of a playoff format. But I think I think the options are endless, like the combinations of the cities that would want to be involved. But I just think this is such a huge step forward. And the fact that they're looking to put this together for next year, hopefully, if everything goes well with the vaccines, and it looks like it is, knock on wood, hopefully we will be able to see cross-border travel a little bit easier. And this is just a perfect timing for this group of players, especially the ones who may be graduating college this year and are looking for someplace to play.
Yeah, you think it kind of like almost like a Canadian Hockey League model where there's the dub, the O, and the Q, and then they meet for the Memorial Cup type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Great example. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, we've talked about this too, but the cries from people once the Canadian Men's Premier League started up, they're like, okay, we got to get on Canadian Women's Premier League. We got to do it right now. And they wanted all the teams to, back a women's team as well. So like Cavalry, like they're like, you have to have Cavalry women as well, and that kind of thing. Do you foresee a point where there is a partnership like that at some point, or is it just kind of like, let's get something D2 established before we worry about something bigger than that?
So I can only speak to Calgary. I don't know about other teams, but my understanding is the ownership at Spruce Meadows was not interested in taking on another project in the near future. So they're just not ready for that kind of a commitment. I think they probably wanted to see a little bit of return when it comes to the Canadian Premier League. It's still in its infancy. Last year was essentially a wash, right? They didn't see any gate-driven revenue. So you look at that first year and it was very successful. I'm just looking at this from a Cavalry point of view, and you had a long run into the Canadian Championship. You made it to the finals. So that year, minus not getting trophies, that year was deemed a success, I would say, for the folks at Spruce Meadows. But will that be able to repeat itself? And I think they're looking to see if there is a return, and let's say how much they lose in the beginning, would they be able to swallow that with a women's team down the road? There's also been discussion that, and Greyson, you've been at Spruce Meadows.
Yeah.
In terms of growing it, it's not ideal.
That's right.
And that's just the way it is. So they've been discussing, there's many, many parcels of land within that area. And the discussion is just, let me get my directions right. So just west of there was talk about building a smaller stadium. So let's say 8,000. So right. That's been a rumor, but again, that's in the near future. No, pardon me, I take that back. Not in the near future, but in the distant future. I don't want to say near because it's not close, but in the distant future. So if they get that under their belt, perhaps they discuss a women's team. And I'm just saying this from my opinion, if Spruce Meadows was able to get on board, Calgary would probably have the first NWSL team. But I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So other options will be looked at. And I think that will be the combination of the Division II professional league that's going to come through United Women's Soccer.
Right. Just kind of off topic here, Sally, you can have a question after this. So Sandra, I'm curious your thoughts on fans coming back for the Canadian Premier League. I know we're talking women's game here, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts. We saw Spruce Meadows was packed, and it was such a fun atmosphere to be in, particularly the final and that type of thing. Now that the game has been away, it was on PEI for a while. Let's say all things aside, vaccinations are good, and they open things up again. Do you see fans across the league, not just in Calgary, flocking back, or do you think that this has kind of set the Canadian Premier League back a little bit, and they're going to have to almost rebuild a little bit of fan base here?
So the diehards will be there for
right.
sure, because it set a high. You said it. The benchmark has been set really high. Calgary, I've lived here all my life. Calgary can be a very fickle team when it comes to professional sports. And that's a reason that this city hasn't been able to hang on to soccer teams in the past. In Calgary, I find the attention span is really short. I don't know what it is. That's just the truth, whether it be the Flames, Hitmen, Stampeders, Roughnecks, whatever. Calvary, I think, will fall into that group. So the team will have to have a successful start out of the gate for people to be like, oh yeah, Cavalry are playing again. That's for the casual fan. And they will need to be drawn in, whether that be through success or through affordable ticket prices or whatever it has to be, but they're going to need to do something to market to that group of fans that are just casual sports followers that want something to do on a summer's night when it's nice out, have a beer with friends. So you have to make it worth people's while. And that's an issue with Calgarians. And listen, I can be like that too. There are days where do I really want to go to a Flames game, or can I watch it at home on HD and not have to pay for parking?
It's no different. It's no different up here in Edmonton. We've seen the same thing. Yeah. So I think I think nowadays with everything on streaming and YouTube, and I could just see it on Twitter or whatever, I think, it's getting tougher, but we've kind of driven off topic here. Sally, bring us back around.
Yeah, well, okay. Give me a minute and I will, I promise. But I think that's every Canadian city. Honestly, I think that's basically every North American city. That just seems to be how North American sports fandom operates. Is it's definitely you have to see success, otherwise people just kind of get disinterested. But I mean, at the same time, when the Flames first came to Calgary after having been in Atlanta, I mean, it must have taken a solid decade before that team really had a crazy following. Because I mean, the NHL having its expansion, everything was still pretty new. So I'm sure it wasn't very different for the Flames at that point either. So I think we give a club like Calgary a solid decade of playing in front of fans, and you would start to have just, your dedicated fan base. It would just happen organically, right? And then I was at that final game. I don't know if you remember there being that Sasky section in behind the goal, kind of just.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that side of the Foot Soldiers. That was myself and the rest of the Wheat Pool faithful. We were all in there with the banners. It was good times. And yeah, that was a fantastic atmosphere, wasn't it? It was. Yeah. It was everything that we have all dreamed of a professional football league in this country being like. It was memorable.
I was at the. I was just gonna say I was at the game that they hosted against Vancouver, and that was pretty bananas too. So yeah. Anyways, so Calgary's doing really well is the point.
Yeah, they are. I mean, success begets success, right?
Yeah, and I think they just they'll need to remind people in Calgary what this team really can be. They need to market to them. They need to market it as a way, this is a great night out. Come see some great soccer, enjoy it with your family, have a beer, enjoy the weather, and see some good sports. So I think they can harness that. Spruce Meadows is a class facility. Yes. It's run by class people. It hosts world-class events. So if anybody can do it, it's them.
It's just the drive is the only issue at the moment. Just getting out there.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, hey?
Yeah, and the nice thing is they've actually, so that area is part of the ring road that's being built in Calgary, and it's progressed nicely probably since you've last been here, Greyson. So it's easier to get there now.
Nice.
So that's really helpful.
Okay, all this positive talk will keep the Foot Soldiers off our ass for a couple of weeks anyway. So,
I did promise that I was going to bring it back.
Yes,
I'm not letting you steal my thunder, Gray. Okay. So, Sandra, in your mind, what should the marketing for this new D2 league look like? What should the league be called? How should it be marketed? And what are sort of the key things that they have to nail for the marketing of this new league and the operations for that matter to give it a good shot at longevity? Because I think another thing people are a bit concerned about is, sure, we might get this new professional women's league, but is it going to last? Because we've seen women's leagues fall apart in the US. I mean, the NWSL, what was it? I think 2 years after the NWSL formed, they were almost into bankruptcy. I think it was, if memory serves me correctly. So yeah, so what are your thoughts on what they need to do, and what should the league even be called?
That's a really good question. I am very poor when it comes to those kinds of things. I'm not really good at marketing and things like that. But To your other point, I think each team will need a player they can market, and a player that, okay, maybe isn't a household name, but let's say if Winnipeg comes into the fold, you know who the first player is that I would want to bring into Winnipeg?
Yeah,
I
Desi
want to bring
Scott.
Desi Scott.
Yeah.
If a team goes into the lower mainland, who's a player that I would want to bring there? Sophie Schmidt.
Yeah.
Sophie Schmidt. Yeah.
So it's just here in Alberta, let's say a team, and she wants to do it. Who am I going to bring? Erin McLeod or Steph LeBay? So that's the way that I see that. And yes, these players are a little bit older, but you could leverage a few years out of them to be the star of this particular club, this franchise, as you start to get this league off the ground and build with players who hopefully most of them would be Canadian. This is a really good way to harness players, and not only in the in the NCAA, but we've got pretty good U Sports players in this country, and we see them in the UWS. So this would be an opportunity for them. And
League One Ontario too, for that matter.
That's right. That's right.
PLSU.
So I think, yep, there are definitely some options there. So I just think we have such an opportunity here. And I don't want people to get stuck on NWSL. I love the NWSL. I love watching it. I love covering it. I think Portland is incredible. I would love to go and watch a game there. But you can't always look south of the border and be like, oh, I want to do that this way. Take it and do your own way. So if Canada has teams in this upcoming D2 league, be a Canadian team. Be proud to be a Canadian team. Don't try and replicate what's happening in the US. What I love about the Canadian Premier League is every city, every club is so different. Everything is so organic. I look at Edmonton, and you have this history of the Eddies, and it's just such this long, this history that you're still bringing with the team here, even as you're a part of a different league. Here with Cavalry, I love the history with Tommy Wheeldon, and the fact that he was part of the Calgary Storm, and that his dad used to coach this team, and he coached him and Nick Ledgerwood, and Nick Ledgerwood is still on the team, and Tommy Wheeldon Jr. is a coach. Like, I love these nuances. It's so Canadian, and I absolutely love it. And I would love to see that on the women's side, because there are so many cool soccer stories in this country that have yet to be told, and players that have yet to be discovered, and just the opportunities there, but just got to grab it.
I love that you,
too late.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the point about bringing in, players, because look, Cavalry with Lethbridge kid, it's as close to home as he's going to get professionally.
Yeah.
Edmonton the first year tried to bring in Edwini Bonsu. Whether that worked or not, it was a name that people knew in Edmonton that generated interest, right? They all tried to do that kind of thing. And yeah, great point about U Sports as well. I call University of Alberta Pandas games, and I've seen some great players come through there, and obviously from other teams, the Dinos and McEwen here in the city, UBC, that kind of thing.
Trinity,
so there's
so
great
many
players.
Yeah,
for sure.
I looked at Quebec. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
I was going to say my cousin's kids play on Trinity.
Oh,
yeah. Like what a fantastic program at Trinity. There's just so many great programs here in the country, and sometimes players don't want to go south of the border for whatever reason. They want to stay close to their families. Maybe the program that they want is more affordable in Canada. So why not let them have the luxury of being able to also play at a high level here? I'm so proud that this program was able to see someone like Desi Scott, who played at Manitoba. Josie Belanger, also another product of what was it? It was CIS, right?
Yeah, CIS.
Acronym, but yeah, sorry, it's fallen behind.
DIAU at one point.
DIAU, there we go. Let's go old school.
So at least we've seen some players who have been able to make it, Olympians. It's just, we just got to harness it. And I feel like I'm banging on this drum all the time, whether it be for hockey or soccer for women, but it's there. We have the talent here.
So I feel like after that impassioned speech of all the things about the CPL that make it so inherently Canadian, I'm about to burst into a flaming maple leaf here of pride. But But I cannot let you get off the hook without providing a potential name for that league. And believe me, the bar is low because the league's possible name for the men's league is the National Soccer League. So you can't get any more generic than that. So you have a very low bar to raise here. Okay. So give us your best shot.
I mean, I'm not good with on the spot. Yeah, I work in radio, but I'm not good with on the spot.
Everything's scripted. You just have to read it, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not allowed to ad lib. Okay, let's circle back. Back. I got to start. We
are getting towards the end, so we'll ask just a couple more, and then we'll let you go. But I guess, how quickly does this league need to get going, and is it possible to get something going within the next year or so? Obviously with that D2, the rumors and whatnot, they want to get it launched. Do you see that as actually a realistic timeline?
I think so. I think the foundation has already been set with the UWS because they've already got clubs in these cities, particularly in California. I think they have 4 or 5 clubs there. Lauren Sesselman was playing for one of them for a really long time. I'm trying to remember, was it Clarita?
Santa Clarita or something Clarita. Like that. Yeah.
Santa Clarita. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact name of the club, but
so so essentially to me, what I think will happen is the UWS, the D2, the unnamed D2, I think it'll end up in most of those cities south of the border, and then obviously north of the border, things might look a little bit different. But yes, I do see this league kicking off by 2022, definitely.
Is it maybe more important for, how do I frame this? Is it more important to get something Canadian established in UWS, or is it more important for them to do their own thing, separate entity?
I just think competition-wise, the fact that at the end of a season, you would be able to travel and play teams south of the border with again a high level of competition. I would love it if it were North American. That's just for me particularly, with a number of Canadian teams. So I just think for the development of players and to be able to just get that true professional experience, I would love if it was not just a Canadian thing, but if it's a North American thing. That's just my preference. Other people may feel differently, and which I understand. And I also wonder if there will be any sort of domestic rules. So in terms of, if you look at teams north of the border, okay, will you need, like, think of the CFL, for example. Will you need this many Canadian players to field a team? Will your starting 11 need this many players who are Canadian? So that, I wonder if that, I actually haven't really researched that. I've reached out to them for an interview, but I haven't heard anything back. But if I do find out more information, I'll let you know. But
if there's no current ratio or anything in UWS, is it the one that Foothills is in?
No.
Right.
Nope. So.
Okay.
I don't see it changing, but listen, if there are more teams, I don't know, maybe they'll want the talent spread out a little bit more. I'm not really sure. So that I would think is up in the air.
Okay, that's fair. Sally, go ahead.
No, I just gotta say I'm still waiting with bated breath to hear the.
You're really hell bent on this name, aren't you?
I'm not letting you get away.
Do you have a name? Do you have a name?
You guys talk a little bit.
Yeah, well, I wanted to use the name Canadian Super League. I know it's mimicking what they have in the UK, but
can you use CSL though?
It would be CSL, but I mean, who cares about that crappy Croatian betting league they have in Southern Ontario?
Whoa, I'm Croatian.
The fix is already in. Then I see.
Well, Sally, I want your reaction to Sandra's thoughts that she wants to be combined with UWS, almost a North American style. Do you like that, or would you rather just see all Canadian?
Man, it's a really difficult question because when it comes to women's football, the depth of players or rather the depth of competition that we would be playing against if it was mixed with the US is really difficult to look past. I mean, the traditionalist in me wants to just see it to be a Canadian league purely, like how the Canadian Premier League is operating, because I really am genuinely afraid that if we go the route that we've gone before, where we're having Canadian teams that are participating in what is essentially a U.S. league, it kind of erodes the stability of the teams, the clubs in this country, because the U.S. side inevitably always starts to kind of take over. And it loses focus. The teams can start to lose focus, and they stop focusing on Canadian player development and start focusing rather on simply being competitive within the league. But I mean, it's really difficult to look past the level of competition that our girls would be able to play if it was mixed with the U.S. I'm wondering if there could be almost a bit of a hybrid where, maybe at the end, for the whole regular season would purely be Canadian teams playing each other. And then you would almost have like a mixed playoff system where then it would be the top, X teams from the US side of the league and the top X teams from the Canadian side of the league that would come together and play just almost like a end of season Champions League type,
like a bracket style, like you're thinking.
Yeah, almost bracket style in a sense, right?
Yeah, I like that.
And I mean, that way it would maintain the integrity of being essentially a Canadian league. But you know what? I'm just going to go with my heart. My heart says, screw the Yanks. I hate them. And we might as well just keep it all for ourselves. And pure Canadian league. Let's do it ourselves. If we don't stand on our own two feet at the beginning, then we're constantly going to be in diapers, and we need to get out of the diapers, have our own league like the CPL has done, and develop our own women's football pyramid. That's for my last line in the sand. Line in the sand.
I was thinking sort of similar lines. Maybe start with 3, 4, 5 teams in a Canadian division of UWS, and when there were more Canadian teams interested, maybe they go, okay, like this is our time to split off. We're going to go do our own thing. Thanks, UWS, but we're moving on.
You know what? It's almost impossible to do that because the divorce never happens the way you think it's going to happen.
No, that's fair.
It's not, like once you're in that league and they're invested in that league's infrastructure, to be able to start a new league from scratch brings on a crazy amount of costs that, to just get that new league infrastructure built out, that I don't think you would have enough buy-in from the existing investors in those clubs to eventually pull them out and allow them to create something that's completely brand new. I genuinely do think that we have to stand on our own 2 feet. We have to develop our own female pyramid, just like we're developing our own male pyramid. And it has to be something that's a pure Canadian solution. So yeah, I mean, we need to build ourselves up rather than using the US as some type of crutch.
That's a really good point. And I just want to underscore what you're saying. And it's not even just about players to me anymore. It's about coaches as well. In the last year, we've lost 2 really big leaders in this country, in Rian Wilkinson and Carm Moscato. And I think that's such a red flag to me. That is so glaring that these 2 have slipped away from Canada. So the fact that if there is a league or whatever we're going to see, the fact hopefully we can draw them back at some point. I also think this is the right step, not only for players, but for people in coaching or front office, for performance, whatever, just to keep them here in Canada, because we're losing talent. Those are 2 really big names. I should have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, but Carm took a job in the Bahamas. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's the dream. No, I would just to follow up. Officials too. I think we're going to see the Canadian Premier League start to increase. The officiating hasn't been bad, but I mean it'll get better. And I think with the women's league too, I think would increase it even more and more opportunities, more people seeing avenues into officiating. I think is a good thing as well.
Well, you're right. People can be like, okay, I can now be the next Sheena Dixon, or I can be the next Drew Fisher. Right? So I'm with you 100%.
You chose Drew? Why would you choose Drew? He is not the one to die on the hill for.
Yeah, but he gets the assignments, man.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, he's the picture right now. So
Oh my God. I guess you could have chose Dave Gantar and then it'd be even worse. But so I got to go back for a quick second and just ask you guys this. What did Ree and Carm actually really accomplish when they were here? What did they actually really accomplish? Because Ree was on the coaching side, but she really didn't do much, in my opinion, on the coaching side. And then Carm, her role seemed to change once every 6 months. At one point, she was just in as a part of the leadership group for the CPLHQ, I believe it was. And then she kind of took on the role as being commissioner of the Women's League for League One Ontario. But then as she also was essentially in charge of I don't know exactly what the role was, but it was looking at the avenues that we could take to form a professional league. But it seemed like nothing ever came out of any of those roles that she was. I've never really seen any actual deliverables come from either of them. And I don't mean to be so harsh, but
no,
I kind of do. So like, what did we really lose, honestly?
Yeah, I think if I can just circle back to Rian and to your point, yes, the success wasn't there, but I'm wondering what kind of tools she was given. What kind of reins did Canada Soccer give her with the youth program? I think I can understand why she's chosen to go to England, but I think she would have been Bev would have been a really good teacher for her. So I was very disappointed to see her leave. I understand why she left, but I was disappointed. I think she's a very bright soccer mind. I remember many years ago when I was hosting an Alberta soccer event and John Herdman was there, and he said, and this was while Rian was still a player, and he said, look out for her because she's got coach written all over her. So I think she needs to be given reps and given that experience. And I just don't know if she was given that with Canada Soccer. She was essentially thrust in as a youth coach. And with Carm, I'm wondering if her moving around is the product of the lack of stability. And I actually want to say, I know it's the product of the stability of the women's game in this country. I think if we had some stability, she'd probably still be here. She strikes me as a person that constantly wants to better herself. She's constantly looking for that next step. And I think she just hit the plateau in this country because I don't think there's anything here right now. And I think I'd mentioned to you earlier, I speak to Katie Collar with Foothills quite often. She's the assistant there and she works under Troy Flannery. And she basically alluded to even the fact for her, like this is it. UWF is it for her. Where can she go from here? Right. So I just think we've hit this point, and that's why we're losing these people. So it's such a shame to me. And I think there are others in technical roles. Somebody like Robin Gale, I think she's waiting in the wings to do certain things. So it's about how big would this D2 league be, is the fact that we could bring these women back and give them bigger roles, whether it be as coaches or in the front office or whatever.
Yeah, you touched on it before. It's not just the players, it's all of these different roles. And yeah, it's interesting that you say flags going up for these two people leaving, and maybe there's just more alarm bells that we've already been hearing for years looking at the game in this country. We've gotten to about that time. I know we could probably keep going, but it's been an hour-ish. So I guess Sandra has to give us the name because Sally won't let us leave.
All waiting.
It's pretty lame.
Okay, here it is.
Let's hear it. It's gonna be great.
It's lame. North American Women's League. That's it.
The NAL.
That's all I got. Yeah, the NAL.
The NAL.
That's all I got, folks.
To start.
I never said I was a marketer. I'm just a radio broadcaster.
Do you think, so I have to ask a question, that name, do you think it's critical to have the word women's in the name of the league? Do you think it's an important thing to have a definer that it's a female league in the name?
That's a really good point.
And I'm not like trying to trash anything. I'm just, because I've had a lot of interesting discussions with a lot of the women's national team fans, specifically that are female, who are absolutely hardcore against any definer that it's a women's league being in the name, and that it actually could be a detractor because all of a sudden you're having to identify a specific sex as being part of the league, right? So I was curious because I've had a lot of differing opinions. So I'm kind of curious on yours.
I don't know. I think for me, I know it's not the norm in Europe, but to me, I look at the WNBA. That's an example for me. That just sticks out. It's so the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, the Canadian Women's Hockey League. I've always been okay with it. But again, that's just me. I can see why people are really passionate about it. But I think as a woman, I embrace being a woman. I'm proud to be a woman, and I'm proud to stay a woman. And I would be proud to have woman in the name. But again, I mean, to each their own on that particular one. I know everybody has their own passion when it comes to that. And I would certainly not argue with somebody about why they should or shouldn't have that in a league name.
I guess
So,
that
Greyson,
it
you're
would
gonna
probably
hate me
follow
for this.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, you're going to hate me for this, but I have one more question to add to that, and it's probably going to extend it another 5 minutes. But
Okay.
do you think that because all those professional leagues, and again, this is all coming from conversations I've had, that do you think there could be any feeling from those professional leagues having the word women in their league names as being a bit of a symptom of gender inequality in the way that sports are regarded between men's sports and women's sports? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll be honest, Jeff, I don't have an easy answer for that. As somebody that works in sport and covers men's and women's sport, and as a woman, it's a larger answer for me. I can't say I agree with it one way or another. To me, yes, of course, I'm not really a feminist. I'm more a proponent of equality. And to me, equality doesn't have to be, I see a trophy and I see the trophy with a ponytail. That actually makes me proud when I see a ponytail on a trophy. The first time I saw the NWSL trophy, I know some people were mad because the trophy, the girl had a ponytail, the symbol.
Right.
That doesn't make me mad. That actually makes me beam with pride when I see a ponytail. And that's just me. And I look at my little nieces and they see certain things and they'll see a ponytail and they're so proud of it too. Be like, oh, that's like me. Like I have a ponytail. Like it's just certain things. I don't know. I guess, and that's the awesome thing about being a woman is we see things, we're all women, but we see things so differently. And I'm really proud of that. And I will never, ever disparage anybody for the views that we have, because listen, it's already difficult for us as it is as women and trying to make it in this world professionally or specifically in professional sports. It's so hard, whether it be as players, coaches, broadcasters, we're always having to go that extra step. So honestly, whatever makes you happy, I respect it and I understand.
It's a great point. Now I'm thinking of an interview earlier this week on, well, it's not Tim and Sid anymore. It's Tim and Friends, but they had Doris Burke on there and they kind of went through, all the stuff she had to go through to get to where she is. And she is just the best. She's so good. So it's anyone can do it. I think that's the important thing to kind of take and move forward with, is that anyone can do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a pretty nice, happy point to leave on. Sandra, we can't thank you enough for joining us here. Let the people know what you're doing, where they can find you online. I know if you go to 660 News, they can find your Women in Sport features that you do, and they're all really good. Just let us know what you got going on and where we can find you online. Yeah, absolutely. So if you happen to be in Calgary, I do afternoon sports for 660 News. On Fridays, you mentioned it. Thank you for mentioning that. I have a Women in Sport feature that I do every Friday, focusing on different things. This Friday, I'll be taking a closer look at the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association and how they've been able to leverage a bit what they've been doing, playing at MSG, playing in the United Center in Chicago. They've formed some partnerships with the Maple Leafs and how the Flames are backing them. So we'll hear a little bit from Hillary Knight.
as well, I do a few things for Sportsnet 960 The Fan, so I do some special projects for them, but we'll see what happens with the Canadian Premier League. I don't know if they'll bring me back to do any stuff. If they do, great. I mean, I understand it's been difficult for everybody in terms of sport and how the pandemic, but if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, I'm not the most interesting follow, but I'm there. So it's S Prusina, and you can follow me on there. And on Instagram, I'm Prusina on air. So I share a few things from the world of broadcasting. And
nice. Love to see the behind the scenes TV, radio. Obviously, it's something I know very well. So Sally, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can always find me on Twitter at Jeff D. Salisbury. And then I'm always posting and commenting on the various CPL fan groups on Facebook, on the Voyageurs Facebook, and then the CPL Discord, if anybody's on that. I'll be on there every once in a while. So a few different places.
Just hot takes all day.
Hot takes. So hot.
And you can find me. You can find me at Greyson Knutson on Twitter. Follow the vodcast at the Cynical Chal 1 on Twitter. Search Cynical Challenge on YouTube. We're also on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the whole 9 yards. Guys, this has been an absolute treat. Sandra, thank you once again. We hope to catch up with you real soon, and we'll keep looking for you to champion women's sports, particularly women's football in this country.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely.